Thank you all for joining us today as we explore a day in the life of celebrating First Nation language. The Polaron team would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians throughout Australia and their continued connection to land, sea, and the community. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. We are dedicated to learning about the histories, cultures, and rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and integrating this knowledge into our practices. Before we begin, I'd like to start with the agenda. We will firstly introduce our panelists and hear from Polaron's founder before moving to our presentation, the panel discussion, and finally finish with the Q&A. Just a reminder that we will answer all your questions and comments during the Q&A section at the end of this webinar. First off, I would like to introduce Uncle Shane Charles, a strong Yorta Wurundjeri and Bon Wurrung elder. He is highly experienced and inspirational Aboriginal leader with a strong track record across a range of sectors, including education and training, justice and arts, and cultural heritage, within both Aboriginal and mainstream organizations. He's an accomplished international artist and elected member of the First People Assembly Victoria. So it's great to have you, Uncle Share. We also joined by Lavinia Hefferman. Lavinia Napchari Hefferman is a Pintupi Luritia woman from Papinian Null Territory, a small indigenous community 3 hours west of Alice Springs. She's an Indigenous Project Officer at National Accreditation Authority for Translators and Interpreters. Her parents were linguistic who did interpreting and translation work, so she has immersed in their interpreting and translating since childhood. She's a NIRI certified interpreter at Pintupi Luritia and English, and also holds a bachelor degree in education. Her skills, knowledge, and experience in the interpreting and translation space has covered many contexts. She's focused on building and empowering others in the Indigenous interpreting and translation professions, so it's great to have you, Lavinia. Finally, I also would like to give a warm welcome to Eva Hussein, the founder and director of Polaron Language Services. Eva is a certified translator, interpreting, and NARI examiner, so she will be our moderator for our panel today. Over to you, Eva.
Thank you so much, Ariana, for that introduction. So I'm just very briefly going to speak about what we do and who we are here at Polaron. So we have been around since 2000. We do have our offices across the world, but Melbourne, Australia, on the land of Wurundjeri people is where our head office is and where I am today on this grey, miserable day. But it is winter in Australia at the moment, so there you go. Something to complain about. In terms of our work, we have been working with multicultural communities since the very beginning on creating and co-creating in-language resources in lots of languages, including Aboriginal languages. So I'm super pleased that we're able to talk about this in a bit more detail because it is a very nuanced and sometimes confusing space. Our team consists of roughly about 1,500 language specialists. So that includes translators, interpreters, bilingual workers, also community leaders and community checkers. Many are NATI certified. And together we create content that resonates and educates communities. So thank you, Ariana, for letting me speak about us a little bit. Thank you.
Wonderful, Eva. All right, so we start with the Aboriginal language diversity. So Australia has over 250 Aboriginal language and more than 100 dialects. Each language and dialect is deeply connected to the culture, spirituality, and geographic of the land. These languages are important links to ancestral heritage, carrying unique regional traits and historical stories. Elders and historical records are guiding efforts to revive Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander language throughout oral history and special programs. These efforts aim to preserve the cultural identity, foster unity and pride, and recognize unique cultural legacies. So, like you see on the pictures on the right side, for example, the picture by Charlotte Allingman that shows how they uses her art to talk about the heritage. And you can see also on your left side the picture of the artwork by Dave Foster that represent the different language group for Australia geographics. Very interesting picture because there are different Aboriginal languages that we can see around Australia. Now we are going to the estimates of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians. So we have 983,700 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that represent 3.8% of the total Australia population at the last census that was in 2021. Of this amount of population, the 91.7% identify as Aboriginal and the 4% identify as Torres Strait Islander. And we have at the end a 4.3% that identify as both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. The graph on your right side also shows the population distribution of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and non-Indigenous people in Australia by 2021. Like we can see on the graph is that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population has a higher percentage of younger age group, particularly under 25 years. Also, the younger age structure of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population suggests that it's a growing community that will need at the future more resources and support, especially for youth and young families. So this demographic trend highlights the need for target policies and programs to support the younger Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islander population. And well, we are now using easy and plain English that in Aboriginal translation. So using easy and plain English means using simple words and clear sentences that everyone can understand. It's about avoiding difficult words or long sentences and making sure the message is clear and straightforward. This helps everyone, no matter their background or language skills, to understand information easily. So why it is important to use easy and plain English in Aboriginal language translations? Well, using easy and plain English when translated into Aboriginal language is very important for effective communications. Aboriginal language have different structures and not everyone is fluent in English, so that's good to know because by using simple and clear language, we ensure that more people within these communities can understand the information. Now we are moving to the panel discussion, so over to you, Eva.
Thank you so much. And I might bring Lavinia in and tell you that before we started, she's already shared with me some of the challenges. Lavinia, if you'd like to turn your camera on, that would be amazing. Thank you. And you have worked in this space for quite some time as a translator, interpreter. You do have NAATI certification and you also work for NAATI. If we move on to the next slide, please. I just wanted to ask you, in your professional practice, what are some of the challenges you have seen? And I think before we started, you told us that one of the biggest challenges is your fight with English, right? Can you tell us a bit more about what that means and how do you fight with English?
Yeah, so Ariana, you started off that really well by some of the challenges that we face, is we're interpreting and translating into from English to language, and the language and terminology that's used by government and non-government agencies that can be challenging because not always what it says in English does not always naturally translate into our language, or they're saying something, but when we're going literal rather than going, oh, okay, so what is this really saying? So yeah, that's been some of the biggest challenges.
Can you give us an example, Lavinia, of something like that?
Yeah, so I was privileged enough to do the big yes no campaign that was happening into my language that I'm Ngāti certified in, which is Pindabay literature. And the words like recognition was a classic example, and I had to work alongside a linguist who happens to be my dad. That helped me. So, you know, things like words like recognition and trying to unpack, well, what is this really saying? Because there is word for recognition. You can say ngurkandano or midapungani, you could use those words, but it didn't really say that, and really trying to go, okay, so what is it really saying? And so we came up with a translation for Nyindi and Yinako, so that they will know who and what, you know, what's happening. So yeah, it was really just some challenges that we faced there.
So you kind of have to explain some of the concepts that we take for granted as English speakers.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. You have one word that can describe many things, and we had to sort of unpack it a bit more and have many words to describe one word, and that's very common.
Yes.
And challenging, but vice versa, it happens in our language too, to English as well at times.
Yeah, and in terms of preserving Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages, of course, many of them are just oral. And you know, sometimes people come to us asking us to do translations in languages that people cannot read, or it doesn't have a script. But that is a challenge in itself, right? To preserve them, because they passed on from your dad to yourself to the next generation.
Was actually my mum's actually is Pindabay literature, so my dad's speaks Pindabay literature and is a linguist. So
he's not a native speaker.
So he's not a native speaker. So that's but he speaks it now. So, and he's quite fluent. So but my oh, my brain's just gone now. But you mentioned there around
preservation, how to preserve languages that are oral. Yeah.
Yeah. So many people are now doing written language, and one of my favorite things is written and the talking poster that they have happening, where you can read along and see the written language, because I think it's a really good way to learn and be educated and see both languages in English and in language. So it's educating in a way that's not in a classroom, if you want to say. And yeah, that's been really good. And you're right, we do a lot of oral, and you get some people who do interpreting who are able to sight translate and interpret quite naturally.
And of course, it starts with our children and ends with universities, whose job should be to, and it is, like, there's a lot of efforts nowadays in Australia to preserve Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages in a way that will leave it as a heritage for the next generation. But I know that lots of schools and childcare centres also include language in their practice to provide safe services and safe care to children. So when they grow up with language as part of everything they do, it's also something that will connect them to the heritage, I would think.
Yeah, so there's certainly a push. You know, there's a school in Alice Springs called Urara College and Yaprinya School, who are both 100% Aboriginal children, and one's primary school, the other one's a high school, and kids come in from remote communities to the high school and they attend the school, and they've been pushing for language classes there, and you know, the students have become teachers and in teaching the teachers to make them feel that uncomfortable space, but to, you know, give that feeling of, you know, what it's like to be in the other shoe. But it's also trying to push for that sort of keeping that language going strong, and you know, there's like you mentioned, lots of universities that have been doing it, and there's lots of people that I know that have been working with Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people that are linguists that have been trying to keep the language going strong, especially traditional languages more, and there's some work done for, you know, the revitalization language, or the languages that are sleeping at the moment.
Right. And Lavinia, just wanted lastly to ask you about something that we get asked about, and that is Aboriginal English. So I've been in this space for a little bit for a few years, and I've noticed that that's no longer appropriate to use. Like, I understand from what you said, is that when you translate, you have to get stuck into the English and really dissect it and make sure, that it's translatable, I guess. But it is my understanding that we no longer write in Aboriginal English. Can you comment on that?
Sorry, I'm just needing to know a little bit more like Aboriginal English, I think like Creole or Aboriginal English that's becoming a little bit more and more sort of introduced in today's language for classrooms for teachers to like have a better understanding of our students.
Yeah, so it's a way of presenting information for Aboriginal people. So,
okay.
And basically the reason that it doesn't work, in my opinion, is that we're talking about very diverse communities with very diverse cultural practices, needs, and therefore you cannot write for every single Aboriginal community in one way. So that is what I meant. That is no longer, acceptable to write for everyone in one particular way.
Okay. Oh, I actually wasn't aware of that. Maybe more Uncle Charles, so Uncle Shane Charles would be more equipped with that knowledge. But
I'll ask him.
But with the Creole language, there are different variation of dialects that are going. You've got Torres Strait, Torres Strait Creole, you've got East and Nariman and Kimberley Creole, which everybody has their own language, and even just with the traditional language, because that's where I'm mainly focused in is the traditional language and the Creole language group, and that's from the areas that I've worked in and my lived experience from where I'm from, the language is, especially the Pindabi language, everybody has a common understanding of spelling and use of signages and things like that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So I think it was just an effort of putting people in one box at some point in Australia's history, I guess, not that long ago, where there was a way of kind of simplifying the language for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, not really taking into account the nuances and linguistic diversity of the community, which is vast. Australia's a massive land with lots of different languages spoken.
And that certainly is the case. There is so many different languages across Australia that's still spoken today. And when people say we want an Aboriginal interpreter, well, do your research of the area and find out what that specific language group is as well.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lavinia. I wanted to officially welcome Uncle Shane Charles. Because he has now joined. Hello. Uncle Shane, which lands do you come from? I believe that you're based around Shepparton, am I right?
No, I'm based in Melbourne, but yeah, I guess my country is Yorta Yorta. I guess within that I have 8 different clans, 8 different dialects. I'm also Wurundjeri of the Polaron Language Group in Melbourne, and also the Bunurong, the Yalaka language group, but I'm also Wamba and joining a Wiradjuri as well. So I guess I represent, up to 40 odd different clans and over sort of 80 different dialects.
Wow. We're very privileged to have you and Lavinia with us today. My question to you is about Koori English, because it is something I've been reading about for some time, but I know that there are efforts, particularly in Victoria and New South Wales, of classifying that as a language that carries no stigma and shame. And it's not just a dialect, it's a language that's kind of developed from English and Aboriginal languages. Have you come across efforts at reviving Koori English or making it more present at schools and community generally?
Well, look, it is, it's I guess it's risen out of not being able to have any language or speak a language or have anything to do with it. So, I guess, when you look at our people, we're very resilient, but also, we adapt things very quickly.
Yes.
And I guess, yeah, it is. And, even in today's world, I guess my time as co-chair of Reconciliation Victoria, I've seen this saturation of language through the education department. And, we've got young ones that are singing, doing welcomes in language and working with traditional owner groups. So it is rising, but also, yeah, definitely there is that hidden jargon, as we say, that, one word means a lot.
Yes.
To our mob, and you don't. And I guess, thinking back in my travels and spending time in the territory, sitting with elders, and he said, today we talk too much.
Yes.
But yeah, definitely it's rising. And
Right.
I know there's a lot of work on the ground in the education space to learn it and to actually speak it. So one of the challenges at City of Melbourne when I worked there was I had to go through 2 pieces of legislation just to get language present around the place.
Wow.
But it is coming slowly, I think, and the next generations are going to be even more. So I've got my language that sits in a book, my Yorta Yorta language. So, I pass it on to my children, and they speak parts of it, but also, there's this blend that we have of language. And I've been doing a bit with the Indian community, how our language is very similar to theirs. We've got some threads that run right through, in the cultural space and in our language. But yeah, definitely it is on the rise, and it's great to see. I know, when I was at Deakin many years back, we talked about, retrieving that, and that was the part we had to do, was to go through the archives and retrieve language so we can, have our Auntie Zeta Thompson is the Sisters of the Sapphires. She said, no, we've got to teach our own first.
Yes.
So but yeah, definitely you start to see it and you start to hear it, which is great.
Because there are different point of views and perspectives, of course, but the language is something that really can connect you to your culture, traditions, and who you are as a person. So that's great to see. We'll move on to the next slide. Thank you. We've mentioned that at the beginning, that often governments or certain organizations want to communicate with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and they don't really know how to do it. So they develop a long document with 50 pages of stuff, and they give it to Lavinia and say, can you please translate it? And Lavinia pulls her hair out and says, that is not the way that it should be done. For all kinds of reasons, including that a lot of these languages are oral, of course, and also literacy levels may not be high in certain communities. So what advice would you give, Lavinia, to people like us, language service providers, to engage effectively, other than saying to the governments, go away and rewrite this document, or consider a video or a different way of communicating this message? What else could we suggest?
Well, it depends. You go, Uncle Shane. You go, Uncle.
Thank you.
We might have 2 different answers. I don't know. We'll wait and see.
Go for it, Lavinia, and then we'll give Uncle Shane.
Depending on where you come from. If you come from, for example, Yorta Yorta country, you go and talk to someone like Uncle Shane, and you get the information directly from the people of that particular area. I live on Yugambeh country, but I'm a Pindabilaricha person. As an Aboriginal woman, I must still, have respect for the Yugambeh people because I'm a guest on their country as well. So if you want to do have a good consultation and conversation about making sure that you have the right protocols in place, it's always really good to go and see, well, whose country am I on and who is the right person that I can go and talk to for the area that I live in. So that's probably always a good start. Uncle Shane, would you agree with me? Or
totally. You got to build a relationship first.
And relationship, yeah.
And identify, and use community to identify who's the best person to talk to, who's the best elder. Like here, we're very few and far between those that actually speak language. So we have a couple of go-to people, I guess, in the community that have, have their tongue wrapped around language, I guess, and yeah, but it's definitely, you've got to, those protocols and developing that relationship, and once that's done, and then then you're a part of community. You're a part of, it's not just a language, you become connected to it.
And like you're talking about service providers. I mean, there's service providers in the Northern Territory and South Australia and WA that, work directly with people who are first language speakers that you can engage with and have conversations with. I don't believe they all do translation, but some of the organizations do translation as well. And it's just about having that conversation with those services like the Aboriginal Interpreting Services.
I think from our point of view, when we work with translators, interpreters in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages, we do a lot of hand-holding. And that is not because we want to be particularly patronizing at all, but there are practicalities such as internet connection, such as not having a laptop, such as really no point of translating a written format of something when we know that the communities will not be able to read. So it is about
but it's not everywhere though. There are some
right.
communities that can read and write quite well, and
yes.
that have been translated and then orally spoken. And yes, there are those challenges, and we have it where I work, where I deliver training online, force people to become certified interpreters, and that is something that we come across all the time. Like internet access sometimes in these remote communities is really hard, or even just phone service in some of the communities, but it's getting better. And I think people are becoming more and more equipped, and the people that I've worked with in Central Australia, and that's where I'm from, Central Australia, there is a lot more written work, and people are becoming a lot more the signs are out a lot more. People are reading signs a lot more. It's just sometimes when we're trying to work with government agencies and non-government agencies, and they're using those big fancy words in English, we really need to have a linguist to work alongside to be able to help us. Okay, well, so what is this actually saying? You take a simple word like take a medicine, for example, is the classic. What does that mean? Do you physically take it, which is what's been interpreted in the past, which means take this medicine, or do you orally, take this medicine and swallow it? And so, it's about, really thinking through what is this message really saying in English. Breaking in is another one. Somebody interpreted that as a literal breaking in. So it's English. If you understand what it's actually saying in English, and most people will, once you've explained it. Once you've explained what's been said, most people will be able to naturally interpret or translate that into our language.
But essentially what we are saying is to really approach this with respect, develop relationships and links, and understand that not everyone's the same, not everyone's got the same challenges and issues. And, to engage with people effectively, you really need to have relationships. You can't just drop into the community and expect everybody to run just because you have a message to deliver. So it's all of those things that you, Lavinia, and Uncle Shane just mentioned that makes it, can make it more successful journey for everybody involved. And also understanding who you're speaking with and who kind of decision makers on the ground are, and who holds the key to communication when you want to engage effectively, I guess is the message. So we'll move on to the next slide, because there's so many questions. I have to tell you, Lavinia and Uncle Shane, that we've got people are just like really, really interested. And we talked about language preservation a little bit earlier, but what can we do what can we do better in terms of making that more sustainable? So we talked about schools and also universities and everything in between, but is there anything else, Uncle Shane, you'd like to share with us in terms of how, given your long experience in this space, on how we can make it, all of us can make it more sustainable and respectful?
Oh, totally. And I just recently came back from New Zealand, and wow, You know, they're lucky they only got one language, but it's everywhere. It's saturated the whole country. Everybody speaks it. The respect for it is profound, you know. So here, I guess, you know, you look at our language. A language isn't just the spoken word. It's the body language. There's pedagogy on how we transfer knowledge. So you talk about language. One word means a lot of things. It has threads connecting to creation, connecting to totem, connecting to women's, connecting to men. So, you know, it can't be loosely used in ways that we have English language today. But the more language is seen, the more people get to see it, they get to accept it, they get to respect it, and they get that understanding. So, you know, one of the challenges was always to put language everywhere, saturate. You know, I wanted to saturate the city of Melbourne with language. Couldn't quite get there, I guess, but left some seeds that, you know, that will grow. So, you know, we're seeing this language starting to be present within council buildings, in certain meeting rooms. You know, we're starting to see language slowly used and evolved. Evolve. But, you know, the more we can understand it, the more, you know, I guess building those relationships with the communities of that respective language, and then, you know, working with them to say, well, how can we preserve? I was part of the original language corporation in Melbourne many years back with a lot of our elders, and we wanted to, one was retrieving it, housing it, and giving it back to communities and countries. So, you know, there can be further work done in the language space. So, you know, helping community to really consolidate their language, but also, you know, in terms of the transcripts of you know, to English or any other culture. We saw that emerge through the Yes vote, where it was, you know, sent out in all the different cultural languages. So, you know, there's so much diversity just in that. So, you know, it'd be great to see, I guess, you know, some of our language being used by, you know, the multicultural community, but also, you know, to see it. It's got to be seen. You know, the more it's seen, and with that, you know, it becomes automatic within society. You know, so
That's right.
helping, you know, communities more. You know, do we need to have, you know, because it was tireless. I remember back then when we were going through the archives trying to find bits and pieces of language, but it isn't just the written word, it's the recorded words. A lot of the recordings of the earlier times of colonisation, you know, so there's some big opportunities in terms of working with communities to retrieve more stuff to help as part of that partnership.
Thank you, Uncle Shane. And I must say that I knew more about Aboriginal culture and languages and things like that before I came to Australia. You mentioned multicultural communities, and I wanted to just briefly touch on it. So I knew more than what my kids learned at school, unfortunately, because we were so hungry for this culture. We were so interested. I come from Poland originally, and you know, I read books and watched TV shows. And I was very surprised when I came to Australia in 1986 to see that visually, in a city like Melbourne or Sydney, it doesn't exist. Like, you couldn't find any traces really, unless you look very, very hard of that visual representation. So I'm glad to hear, and I have also seen it, that there are efforts of kind of reclaiming that space and really pushing, because this is something that Australia and Australians should be very proud of. It's very unique, it's very beautiful, and it's just such a shame that it hasn't been amplified to the levels it should be. Lavinia, just a question for you, because I think interpreters and translators also play a very important role in preserving language. You've mentioned earlier that there are courses, you work at Ngati with training of interpreters. It is a challenging space, but I think interpreters and translators can be such a good conduit into the community. And once they are trained and supported, they can deliver a great service that then helps the language to survive and be more present. Yeah, would you like to comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, we've noticed in the last 12 months there's been a huge increase in number of people that are coming through wanting to be NADI certified in Aboriginal languages, and we in fact we even certified some people for the first time in a in the new system that we've got now going just recently into modern Pata language. So that was really exciting for us. But yeah, so that you know, interpreters and translators, I believe, play a really important role in trying to preserve the language because, you know, one of the things that we learn about is, you know, Aussie's Code of Ethics, where we learn about professional development. And with that professional development, as interpreters and as translators, we need to be equipped in all languages, whether it's the old language, the traditional language, or whether it's the new evolving language that's happening with all the young kids that are coming through today. So it's always, you know, going back home to country, sitting down, talking to the older people and all the elders and listening to that and you know, getting that professional development done as on the job and but you know, loving it at the same. I'm a language nerd, so you know, listening and learning at the same time. And I love listening to all my little grannies, you know, that are coming through the ranks that are speaking language and just listening to their style of English and the influence of YouTube. So of English. So the English that they're speaking a lot more, you know, it's no longer lollies, it's candy, and you know, like that sort of language that's coming through at the moment. But yeah, the definitely you know, it's with the work that we do, it's really important. And I love doing the poster projects the most because you get to see the written language, you get to read it, and you see the English, and you're like, oh, okay, so there's education happening at the same time.
And a lot of pride, I guess, from people that are now able to be supported in speaking language and continuing this great work.
Yeah.
We might move on to the next slide quickly, but like I said, we're very keen to. We've already covered that one. All right, cool. So online, as we were streaming, there's so many questions from the attendees. So I might just hand over to my colleagues to ask you some questions. And I did want to thank you sincerely, Uncle Shane and Lavinia, for participating and sharing your experiences with us. Over to you, Ariana, for some questions.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you so much for all your expertise and for being here today. Yeah, we have some great questions. So let's start with the first one. So is Polaron helping to translate different resources for organizations such as 13 Yarn, Through Telling Queensland, or similar?
Yes, the answer is yes. It is a space that I, as a you know, translator and interpreter, I want to be very careful in that I want to treat it with a lot of respect. And we covered some of the themes that are a concern for me. So when we discuss things with prospective clients, we really dig deep into the communities and reasons why we would be suggesting to do certain things or not to do certain things, because there's such a huge diversity of language and literacy rates and all of that, that it needs to be kind of individualized and tailor-made for each community.
Wonderful. All right, let's go with the next one then. So what does the future of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander language look like?
So this is like our dream world, Lavinia. What do you think? What does the future look like? It's going to be taught at every single primary school. Yeah.
Look, times are changing. There's more and more, you know, signs that are going up in first languages. So people are really trying to put that awareness out there. I know that if you go to places like the Alice Springs Desert Park in Alice Springs, everything's written in Aranda first, then into English, you know, and that was done purposefully and you know, to make sure that the language was recognized first. And you know, if we keep having them in our schools and encouraging our schools to teach, especially like when I'm talking about back home, you know, like speaking languages in schools. And I know that here in Yugin Bear country, they do the same thing. They're trying to put them into schools and trying to make it more and more accessible to people. And I hope and pray that the language will continue, even with the evolving, that, you know, with the new legislation or the new policy that's come out,
yes,
that more work can be done in this space, not only for languages that are sleeping, but also for the traditional languages that are still spoken. I kind of feel like we get forgotten sometimes.
Yes, yes. Uncle Shane, what's your vision for the future when it comes to language?
Well, I was blessed to go to one of the schools in New Zealand, and that's all they speak is their language.
Wow.
Quite profound. You know, they did the big welcome for me, and this transfer of you know, words and transfer of, yeah. I felt out of place actually, because you know I'm sitting there and my language is in a book on the shelf at home. You know, we have parts of that, but how moving forward, I guess, you know, being part of the first People's Assembly for Treaty, you know, language is going to be the foundation, you know, in our education spaces. But as a country, it'll be the foundational words and language that we see. So I like to see the place saturated with it. You know,
Yes.
but it's also recognition for the different dialects, you know, not just one language, and showing that diversity of language. So language can be the start of something great for this nation in terms of, you know, building the relationship, building the respect. Bang, we've got the language. What's next, and how language connects to everything else we do. Right. So I see it really taking shape moving forward. There's a lot more. It's being used a lot more in community at the grassroots level. So, you know, and then eventually it will be, you know, it's a gift from our people to the nation.
Such wise words. Yes, Lavinia.
I was just agreeing with it. It's a gift, you know, and, you know, like rather than getting all defensive, embrace it. Let's work together and learn.
Yeah.
Some
That's
really
a
great
good.
points.
Well,
Yes,
there
Ariana,
is
we probably have time for one more. Go for it.
yeah. There is a question that is just coming in the similar context, because they say, is there any basic language classes for the Aboriginal people to learn their own mother language additional to English?
There are in some
Oh,
communities. Yeah.
Yeah, there is. So,
yes.
so if you live in Adelaide, and you're a Pindara person who don't speak Pindara, there's companies in Adelaide that run Pindara classes and are quite successful. And with Pindara comes Yankunytjatjara, so they're similar language, they're variation in dialect, but close enough that you could learn it. So, shout out to Iriri who does that over in South Australia. And in Central Australia, you know, they're starting to do Central Eastern Aranda classes over there. They've got a school that runs it. They've got, I think, the bachelor's trying to run Aranda classes out there as well. So when I say Aranda, I meant Central Eastern Aranda. And I know that there's a bit of momentum happening to try and open the doors more. You go up to Top End, there's heaps up there happening as well. So when I say Top End, I mean up in the Arnhem Lands and in that area. So yeah, so there's a lot of work that's been done, and there's 2 Aboriginal schools in Alice Springs that teach in language and have culture days and language days that you bring your school, and same as at Urara College. So one's a primary school, the other one's a boarding school for kids that come in from remote communities.
That's wonderful. And I did want to add, given that the multicultural framework review report has come out, so this is a little bit different, of course, but one of the recommendations there was to invest in language services, meaning interpreting, translating for the multicultural communities. Because really, if you think about it, Australia is such an amazing hub of languages. Like there's no other country in the world that would have this diversity, this richness, and the system and structures. You know, Ngati is a very good, it's imperfect in places, but it's a very good system to enable interpreters and translators to practice. So I think, you know, in our vision, we could perhaps include this country of ours to be a hub for different cultures, languages, and it's great to see and hear of these efforts that are happening as we speak. It is work in progress, as Uncle Shane has mentioned, and perhaps one day we'll reach the heights that he's witnessed in New Zealand. But we will have to work on it. Ariana, I don't know if we have another question, like we're literally right on time, so.
Yeah, just one real quick. So now that we are talking about translation and interpreting, so what kind of medias or digital platforms contribute to the spread and preservation of the language?
I can tell you that I've done cartoons in this language. So because little J is done in my language and various other languages. I've done audio announcements plenty of times, but more for Central Australia. NITV, ICTV, they all have stuff in languages, but there's lots of work that's been done in this space for the languages that are still spoken today. Uncle Shane might be able to give a different perspective.
Please go for
No,
it.
no, definitely you're right. And, I guess it's, the outside community and on the internet and YouTube and everywhere else, it's everywhere. And there's more and more languages presented in, even in movies and that sort of thing. So, we continue to move on, and language will continue to grow and strengthen, I guess, for our people. So, with us, it's we need to know this for our children's future, for our future generations, so they can speak it. So working towards retrieving it, working towards activating language, and in any opportunity, I guess. So.
And even songs, like you've got Electric Field, who's been singing in Yamjindara, and you've got the original band where I'm from, Murray Band, shout out to my uncles, that started in singing in language, as and you've got Youth the Indie. There's so many songs that are sung in our language. I think Barker, what's that? Oh, Baker, young Baker. Barker's the other lady that sings, raps as well. But there's the rap singer that raps in Yolngu. So there's so much out there that's coming through.
Yes. And when we talk about language, we talk about that pedagogy of language. Okay, so it's a silent word. We had that. The most amazing, profound thing I ever witnessed was a silent language up in Nhulunbuy. When I went there, and I'm there, and there was peace, but they were having these amazing conversations with their silent language and laughter, and and then you can sing language, you can paint language, you can dance language. So all of that too needs to be aligned with it, and it comes with the journey. So enhancing it through other ways.
And that's where when people do their NADI certification, we talk about, that cultural awareness around that sort of, silent communication around that intercultural conversation that people that have without speaking and knowing exactly what's going on.
Lavinia and Uncle Shane, you've lifted our spirits. You're leaving us in a more positive space. It sounds like there's so much effort. It's work in progress. Yes, we acknowledge that, but there's some really good work being done at the grassroots level, but also policy level. And you're leaving us with hope that we can continue to preserve language and work with communities respectfully, because they do need information in the right way, at the right time, through the right people. So from me, a really big thank you to Lavinia for your time, and also Uncle Shane for sharing your perspectives and your insights. I know that there's been many questions we haven't been able to answer, but it sounds like we have to meet again, I think, maybe. And we sincerely wanted to thank you for your time. Contact details for any of us are here. Have a wonderful afternoon, Lavinia and Uncle Shane, and thank you respectfully and sincerely for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good to meet you. See you again.
Yeah. See you. Hello.
Go forth and populate.
Good one. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.